Hello folks, Dick Fairburn here. The video scheduled for this week about how to defend your country, how to interface with police, was recorded prior to the assassination attempt on President Trump. So I wanted to do a little intro. I did a video specifically on that, some of the failings that I saw that just jumped out. I want to do a little bit of an update on that, and then we'll get into this weekly video because I had to record it this way because I'm out of state. We've learned things about the assassination attempt, but there's still a huge amount of information we don't know. I suspect we will never know truly what happened there, because I think some people will be embarrassed by some of the findings, and people in high places in government agencies don't like to be embarrassed. So the easiest way for them to get around that is to not let out all of the bad information. That's just the way things work. We have not had a presidential assassination attempt since 1981. And this is the first rifle attack since John Kennedy's assassination in 1963. It's really the first attack, significant attack by rifle since the modern Secret Service protection techniques have developed, with counter snipers, high overhead cover, and things like that. So it got tested, and I think their techniques came up failing a little bit. Here's some of the disturbing things that we do know pretty much as facts. I mentioned in the video I did right after the assassination attempt that the shooter's location was an obvious, ideal location for a sniper. And I said that it should have been occupied. You know, you can either occupy those positions in your advanced assessment, or you can cover them with other snipers. They chose to cover it with other snipers. An interview with the Secret Service director, she made a rather amazing statement. She said, first of all, that was the responsibility of local police agencies because it was outside of their security perimeter where they do magnetometer scans and all of that thing. Okay, I might buy that. Local police did have a SWAT contingent there, but instead of being on the roof of that building, they were in the building. I don't know how you protect that dangerous location if you're inside and can't even see what's going on the roof. But in a previous video, I mentioned some pretty significant failings of police agencies in the last few years. And I'll tell you, my profession is not what it was when I started. We were all gun-oriented, shooter kind of people. They're not now. We had a very high degree of military experience among officers when I started. We do not have that now. And it's compounded also by the fact that we've got defund police and BLM and a lot of other things going on in the country, which has caused police officers to hesitate, to pull back, less aggressive, and hesitate even more before they step over the line of using deadly force. So it's a bad situation. She said they decided not to have snipers on the roof of the building that the shooter used because of the steep pitch of the metal roof was not safe. Now, my dad worked construction all of his life, and I helped him quite a lot. I've nailed a lot of shingles on roofs. That's a 212 pitch. That means it rises 2 inches for every foot of travel up the roof. That's the lowest pitched roof ever used. The only thing lower pitched than that is a flat roof. There is nothing at all dangerous about that roof. In fact, the Secret Service counter sniper team you see in the background or in the footage of the shooting of the president, they're on a 412 pitch metal roof. That's twice as steep. They have no problem being there at all. So that was a just absolutely ridiculous statement. Local police in the area of the shooter's location, they had spotted him prior to him getting on the roof, thought he was suspicious, but apparently didn't make any contact with him. In another contact with him, a police officer decided he needed to take a picture of him, and there are unconfirmed reports that he even sent that picture out for other people to kind of beware of, that he's suspicious. Yet he didn't make contact with him. He didn't make any attempt to ID the person. The real kicker is that apparently one of those snipers stationed at that location saw him using a rangefinder to check distance between that building and the podium, and they still didn't make contact with him. As far as I'm concerned, if I've got somebody close to a presidential event and he's using a rangefinder, he's detained. I'm not going to cuff him and arrest him, but I'm taking control of that person. I'm getting him out of there, and I'm calling investigators over to deal with this guy to see what the hell's going on. That's just unthinkable to me. There's a worse one. People in the area had been yelling at the police, yelling at the Secret Service for several minutes that there's a guy on the roof. Even reports that there's a guy on the roof with a rifle. So local police officers, I'm told, attempted to get a better view. Now there are differing opinions. One report said he climbed up a ladder that was at the building. Another said he stood on the shoulders of another officer to get high enough to see over the edge of that roof. And that when he did get a view onto the roof, the shooter turned around with the rifle, pointed it at the police officer, and then the police officer, one report said he fell off of his buddy's shoulders, another one said he just ducked down and sort of retreated. Here's my point. Here's why I talk about, the military experience and the gun-oriented experience early in my career. If I'm going to peek up over the edge of a roof because I've been told there's a guy there with a rifle at a presidential speaking event, probably the first thing clearing the edge of that roof is going to be my pistol. Or maybe better yet, if I'm solid enough, I'm going to have two hands on a rifle. I'm going to be able to deal with a potential threat if I find one there before I ever look. So if this guy thinks he's going to turn around on me with a rifle, I'm going to light him up. That's how I think. That's how those officers should have thought, and apparently they did not. And the reports are that once that officer was spotted by the shooter and the officer retreated, that the shooter immediately turned around and opened fire. So he had rushed shots. I've already discussed the wind problem that was there at that. It appears from a couple of photographs that I had that he had an optical sight, but it was either an Aimpoint or an EOTech, a 1X non-magnification optic. Depending on the size of the dot that you use in those, they could almost cover up the president's face at 130 yards if it's a coarse aiming dot. So we're lucky that he had things hampering him. And as I said, there's no doubt in my mind that President Trump was not meant to die that day. He had an angel on his shoulder. Not having that shooter's location occupied by police officers, even just a uniformed cop with a pistol, nearly cost President Trump his life. Now, yesterday they released a threat that Homeland Security and the FBI had identified, that there is they think a plan by Iran to attempt an assassination on President Trump because he killed one of their top terrorists when he was in office. The leftists have toned down their bad rhetoric against Trump a little bit, but not a lot. You can only change a leopard so much. The spots are still there. And I suspect as time goes on, they're going to get right back into that, destroy the country, fascist, Hitler descriptions of Trump again. Point is, there's still a lot of threats against him out there. So the Secret Service needs to have a real serious ass kicking. They need to give him presidential level security, not the B grade or C grade level that they had for treating him just as a candidate. There is no doubt in my mind there will be attempts on Trump again. I still believe he should not do outdoor events, but the Secret Service has to step up amazingly. I was praising the body detail during the shooting in Butler. I still think they did a pretty good job, but you saw one short female agent there in that escort detail to get him off the stage. Typically, they like bodyguards who are as big or bigger than their principal because they're shields, they're meat shields. She was not an effective meat shield. I'm 5'7". I can't be on the body detail for Donald Trump. I'm just too short. And I noticed when he showed up at the convention, he was surrounded by linebackers. And that's the way it should be. So hopefully the Secret Service is stepping up and are going to do the right thing. So with this little bit of update, and I'm sure as time goes on there will be more detailed information out about the assassination attempt and we'll be able to analyze it better. But I wanted to give this little update before I get into it. And so now we're going to go to the pre-recorded topic for this week, which is, are you ready to defend your country? And some tips about how you can be prepared to do that. So thank you very much, and we'll roll the video. Hello folks, Dick Fairburn here. Today I want to talk about civil unrest, maybe building into civil war. We certainly hope we never get there. What can you do to be better prepared for both protecting yourself and your family, and maybe protecting your community? How can you get involved to help the powers that be resist this violence that I think we're going to see coming from the left? If you're interested in these thoughts, stay tuned. Okay, I've done a few videos talking about unrest that we will very possibly see between now and November. Could it build into a civil war? We certainly hope not. We have thousands upon thousands of illegals who have come across the border in the last 3 years, many of them from foreign countries that are not our friends. Is it possible that China could have so many people in here that they could actually start an invasion from the inside rather than having to drop paratroopers in like the movie Red Dawn? Go look at my video Yellow Dawn. If any of these things happen, even just major riots in cities like we saw in the election cycle of 2020, what can you do to help? Because if these things get big, at some point we're going to have to see citizens get involved. Wolverines are going to have to spring up around the country like the movie Red Dawn. One of the terms bandied about on the YouTube and other communities is Minuteman. Are you prepared to be a Minuteman? And I think a lot of those Minuteman videos and Minuteman preparation things are mostly just an excuse to go set up a big battle belt with a pistol and high-cap magazines and an M4 and all kinds of neat, cool shit screwed onto your M4. They're kind of playing at it. And some of them are not playing. Some of them are deadly serious at it. Will we need those Minutemen at some point? Yeah, we might. So, if you're going to consider being prepared to defend the country, defend your state, defend your locality outside of your own family unit, here's the first thing you have to do. Make sure your family unit is well prepared for and well trained in what to do. Now, they don't have to be trained as fighters, but they have to be trained how to react. I have a very simple video that it was originally intended for police officers, but I said, you know, what do you do if you're at the mall and you hear an active shooter situation begin? And I trained at the academy, I trained these young cops. I said, well, you got two choices if you got your family with you. Okay, the first is, I'm just going to get me and my family to safety. And so the training for that is, train your family that when I say follow me loudly, that means everybody grabs hands, we form a human chain, and I'm taking you to safety. And the oldest maybe not going to grab my hands, maybe they're going to grab my belt because I've got two hands on a pistol because I may need that to get us to a safe location. So follow me means we're leaving, grab hold of us. The second option is, I'm going to send my family to safety, but I'm going to go attempt to engage the active shooter. Much more dangerous situation. So I trained that with a simple command of call 911. You turn to your spouse, you turn to your oldest child and say call 911. That means everybody grabs hands with them and they take the family to safety. And then they call 911 and say, hey, my dad's going to try to go stop the active shooter, and he's this tall, and he's got glasses and a beard, and he's, wearing blue jeans and a black shirt. Try to get some word out to those cops who are headed that way with their hair on fire on the report of an active shooter situation. So that's how to survive an active shooter. Think through what could happen, what these events could bring to you and your family, and condition your family about what you want them to do. I mentioned that in a previous video. Even if it's just a fire safety plan for your house, which you should have. Okay, if the fire alarms go off, we're all going to leave. We're going to go to the tree out in the backyard. We're going to rally there. You're 11 and you're 12. You make sure your younger brothers and sisters, we're going to go try to rescue them. But if we can't for some reason, you make sure they get out. Just come up with a plan. Drill it a couple times. Make it a fun event for the little kids. But you're instilling in them what needs to be done and how to do it. And we practiced it. So if you're going to protect outside of your family unit, make sure your family unit is ready first. Do they have food? Do they have water? Do they have shelter? Do we have weapons and ammo, if that's a consideration for what we're dealing with? Focus on the family. Only then should you look at combining your skills and resources with others around you to be prepared to be Minutemen. I'm going to try to avoid the word militia. I'll probably use it a lot of times anyway, but the militia term has been so bastardized by the news media and the leftists that it's almost impossible to make it sound like something positive anymore. But the militia concept, which was even an essential part of the Second Amendment in our Bill of Rights, is that you have a responsibility to protect your community. They didn't have law enforcement agencies to call back in the 1776 era. They didn't have the military. They were going to be at war with the ruling military very shortly. That's where the Minuteman concept came from. Every community had a militia. And when they called up the militia, you had to show up with your own weapon, your own ammunition, your own water, and a pound of bread. So you were there, you were able to fight for a day or so until we realized what things were going to develop from there. Now, modern organized militias, and there have been several spring up over the last 20 or 30 years. Michigan had a pretty notable militia for a while. There were a couple of others that I happen to think started out as sensible ideas, and I had some friends who were card-carrying members who were fine, upstanding folks, mostly police officers. Those two groups are called Oath Keepers and the 3%ers. Now, the Oath Keepers' philosophy was you swore an oath at one point in your life to the military, to a law enforcement agency, to maybe a firefighter or somebody. You swore an oath to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States. If you are put in a position where your boss is telling you to do something in violation of the Constitution, then you have an obligation to say no. I'm not going to blindly go do what you tell me to do. So that was the concept behind Oath Keepers. The 3%ers came from the idea that really only about 3% of the population of the continental United States ever openly, actively fought against the British military. So it was really 3% of the citizenry that earned this country's freedom, that bought our freedom with their blood. So if you were a member, then you said, I'm one of that 3%. If it ever comes to that again, I'm going to be one of that 3%. And as I said, I had friends that were members. I read up on them. I kind of watched them. I think the problem with both Oath Keepers and 3%ers, and it's I believe they're both pretty much non-existent anymore. The problem was those kind of groups attract wannabes. They want to be seen as, former military or former cops or patriots of the country. But they don't always have the best interests at heart. And it also attracts some people who are openly white supremacists, KKK types. It was difficult for those organizations to screen those people out. Now, and I'm not defending them. In some cases, the leadership themselves either became those kind of people or had those kind of leanings early on. They were both involved with the January 6th incident at the U.S. Capitol building, and I'm not going to take a side on that. I don't agree with what a lot of those people did there. By the same token, we know that a lot of the prosecutions are fictional. The Supreme Court already ruled out one of the statutes they used to prosecute a lot of those people because there was absolutely no way it could be legally applied to what happened that day. They used that statute because they could get a more severe prison sentence than some of the lesser things, just like, being in a closed environment, being somewhere where you're not supposed to be, essentially. But then, when the videos were released, we see the Capitol Police just basically opening the doors and saying, come on in. So how can you be charged with, violating a closed space when the cops wave you in? The young Air Force veteran gal that was killed there, the Capitol Police officer that shot her, he was exonerated. They said it was a good shoot, but how you can shoot an unarmed person who poses no physical threat to you or others around her whatsoever, I'm not sure how you can rule that a justified shooting. So there were a lot of things on both sides of that January 6th event that I think are highly suspect. But it became the final nail in the coffin for both Oath Keepers and 3%ers, because some of their upper people were involved with what happened there that day. And I think a couple of them are in prison as we speak. Now, if your militia groups get to the point where you need to organize more formally, you're going to need a chain of command. You're going to need someone to be in charge. You're going to need less, mid-level people to take charge of squads. In the past, those leaders have always been elected. Abraham Lincoln was elected into a militia position when Black Hawk Wars of the 1830s occurred with the Black Hawk Indians in northern Illinois. So this is an old tradition. Anybody with military experience in your group should probably give extra consideration for that leadership. You always want to guard against who's joining your militia. There are wannabes everywhere. They may claim military experience they don't have. They may be hiding some white supremacist views that are just kind of boiling under the surface that's going to cause you problems. So as much as possible, screen your ranks and self-police to the degree that you can. These spring-up militias are defensive in nature. You are not trained, you are not equipped to go offensive against whatever the problem is in your area. So as much as possible, you're just going to shelter yourselves. You're going to defend yourself against the problem which might be coming your way. You're not planning, you're not operating very far from your home ground. That's going to get to be a whole different can of worms when you get into that level. I think it's a good idea for these spring-up militias, if they ever have to happen, make yourselves known to the local law enforcement agencies. Now, the first response we have to any kind of a Civil War problem, shit hits the fan problem, we're going to look to law enforcement to, respond to those problems and hopefully address those problems. They're going to run out of resources very quickly. Most police departments are not working at full strength nowadays because the hatred that exists in this country for law enforcement right now, they're having a lot of trouble recruiting. There are agencies working at 50% strength. So if the calls they get, the problems they have to face grow exponentially, they're overwhelmed. So let them know you're there. Let them know you got their back. You're the good guys, not the bad guys. And so the question will come up, at what point could you be used to assist your local law enforcement in dealing with whatever the threat is that your community faces? I don't have a simple answer for that. It's going to depend on where you live, how big the population is, how you or some of the members of your militia might already be known to the law enforcement community. But remember this, for the most part, law enforcement, including most SWAT teams, do not have basic military training, infantry-style training. I tried to promote that at the end of my police career. We got it into some of the SWAT ideas. We got it into a big nationwide movement called MACTAC, where we said the police have to know infantry fighting tactics to the degree that they know bounding, overwatch, they know fire and maneuver to come in on a live fire event. But as a general rule, they don't know those things. If you've got an Afghanistan veteran in your local spring-up militia, they might be better trained and equipped to handle that kind of situation than the active law enforcement agencies. And trust me, egos get in the way. Sensitive toes get stepped on. And it's a balancing act. If you're going to be part of a local militia and you're going to interface with your local law enforcement, take every advantage you can to make that a smooth and seamless melding of what you're going to do. Can you help them? We see citizens jump in to help police officers making bad arrest situations all the time. You know, they'll help hold a guy down while the cops get him cuffed. Every year we see incidents of armed citizens with concealed carry permits getting out and holding a suspect at bay or shooting someone who has, got the gun and trying to kill a police officer. So the idea that citizens help the cops is both common and good. So we want to continue that to the degree that we can. But if we've got a large group of Antifa people spilling out of Chicago into one of the suburbs up there in the riots of the Democratic Convention this year, let's say law enforcement is attempting to deal with an armed intrusion into their community, and you go running up behind them with an M4 in your hands thinking that you're there to help the cops, that may go bad for you. If they don't know you, they just turn around, they see some guy running up behind them with a rifle, it's going to go bad. So unless you live in a really small community where you're pretty certain most of the officers know you, or maybe in the case like me in this community, I'm the retired public safety director. I've lived here an awful lot of my life. They know I'm a cop. I still do some of the training for them. We all know each other. So if they're in a bind, and it could be something like a school shooting, something ordinary, or it could be a shit hits the fan kind of situation. If they see me pull out and jump out with a rifle, they're just going to say, hey, here's where we need you. That's probably not going to work for Joe Citizen, unless you do some things to become known by the local police. And if you think you might become involved in one of those little spring up militias, if the world goes bad, and you think you would want to be able to assist the law enforcement, the time to work on that is now. In many states, you can become an auxiliary police officer or reserve police officer. They have different names in different places. Now, in some states, it's very easy. In Illinois, to become an auxiliary police officer, to meet the state requirements, you have to be vetted through a background check and fingerprints. You have to attend a 40-hour mandatory firearms training course, which teaches you not only how to use a police sidearm and shotgun, but when you can legally use the weapon, what arrest powers you have as a part-time or auxiliary police officer in the state of Illinois. So, be vetted through a background check, take the 40-hour course, and be, approved by your city council and sworn in as an auxiliary police officer. It's really pretty easy here in Illinois. Now, your arrest powers are severely limited. By law, you can really only make arrests when a fully certified police officer is present with you. So you can't go out on your own and make arrests. The downside is there are suburbs in the counties surrounding Chicago where they will get these auxiliary officers at that 40 hours minimum of training, and they'll send them out on patrol by themselves. And that's not what the law allows. Of course, up in that corner of Illinois, they don't really care what the law says. They do what they want because they're saving money. We had a city, county, not really a SWAT team, but a raid team. They would go serve high-risk drug warrants and things like that. And their medic was a deputy sheriff who was a paramedic. And a few years ago, he was unfortunately killed in the line of duty. So the team was without a dedicated medic, and one of the firefighters that worked for me in my fire department was a paramedic, just an exceptional stand-up guy. He came in the office one day and he goes, hey, your SRT doesn't have a medic. He said, could I volunteer to be their medic and go on raids and call-outs with them? And I said, that'd be great, but I would want you to be armed so that if something went bad, you could defend yourself. So I had him, he was already background checked. We had him go through the 40-hour mandatory course. We made him an auxiliary officer. That way he could be armed, carry a pistol. He qualifies with the cops once a year. He's not probably ever going to make an arrest, and if he does, there's going to be plenty of, sworn officers around him. So using that rather easy auxiliary police officer system in Illinois allowed me to take a firefighter medic, put him on the police raid team to use his skills, and at the same time be able to protect himself by carrying a gun. Similarly, the school superintendent asked me at one time, he said, I would like to arm some teachers in my school to be prepared for school attacks. Is there a legal way to do that in Illinois? And Illinois specifically does not have any laws that allow schools to do that. So I said, well, here's one way we might. You identify the people you want. We will background check them. We will have them attend a 40-hour mandatory police firearms training course. And we will get them through the council, and we will swear them in as an auxiliary police officer. That would allow them to have a gun at least locked up in a box on their desk or something like that. And that if something bad happens in the school, then they can switch over into auxiliary police mode. They can't technically make an arrest until a regular full-time officer is there, but they're on the way. And I ran that by the lawyers, the legal beagles at the state training board that oversees police training and certification. And they weren't particularly happy because I had found a loophole around arming teachers to be in schools. Now the superintendent got busy on other things. We never went forward with that process. But what I'm telling you is many states have an easy system for getting you into an auxiliary or reserve police officer status. That's one way for you to help your local police department. Now, in Wyoming, where I had a number of years of experience, there was no system like that. If you wanted to be a peace officer in that state at any level, part-time, full-time, reserve, auxiliary, but everybody had to go through an academy training program. So you had to go to 10 weeks of training and be certified as a peace officer. And a lot of states have that kind of requirement. Illinois is easy. There are other states around that are kind of easy. Some are pretty difficult. So if you cannot go through an auxiliary or reserve police status to get a foot in the door with your local police department, you can simply volunteer. A lot of agencies do what they call citizens police academies. So sign up and attend one. It's usually one night a week for several weeks, and we're going to let you ride with a cop for an hour. We're going to take you out to the range and show you how we shoot, and you're going to get some law classes of somebody standing up in front of a classroom that night. But you just get an overview of what it's like to be a police officer. And by going through that Citizens Police Academy, now they know you. So if you're in a small community and they're being overwhelmed by spillover from the Chicago Democratic Convention riots this fall, you can, show up and say, what can I do to help? Or you can just simply volunteer. Call your local police chief or sheriff and say, hey, I'm a good citizen. In fact, if you want to check me out, I'll even sign a waiver and let you run, to get through leads and get a criminal history on me. That's called a CQH. And show you that I'm a decent guy. You could get overwhelmed. I'm concerned about where the direction this country's headed, and I want to help if I can. And maybe it's just to sit in the 911 center and take calls, because when bad things happen, 911 centers get overwhelmed. And sometimes the phones ring for a long time before they get called because of the radio traffic that the folks are having to deal with. So maybe you can be a call taker. Maybe you're just the guy that makes the run to Dunkin' Donuts, because, hey, cops do eat donuts, So there's ways to get involved with the police department, and that way, if something does happen, and if you do get 4 or 5 people in your subdivision who kind of form a loose militia, you're known to them. And they may turn to you to help with some problem, or you may be able to show up and help with some problem. If we experience the level of violence and lawlessness we saw in 2020 in that election cycle, cities burning, whole sections of cities just ceded to the rioters for a time frame, police is going to be overwhelmed. That's state, local. Trump sent in federal law enforcement assets to some of those cities that were willing to let him do so. And that influx of people was able to pound down those riots in those communities. But most of those big cities didn't want Trump to look good because they're all run by, left-wing Democratic politicians. So they kept him out whenever they could. As a retired and a career law enforcement officer, I want to say something to those of you out there in law enforcement today. When you took the job, or this really goes for the military as well, you swore an oath. Now, you did not swear to protect a government. You did not swear to protect a president. I'll base this on the Army enlistment. What you swore was an oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Not a government, not a president, not an individual person. You swore to protect the Constitution. That's what this is all about. Support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Now the oath goes on. You will also obey the orders of the President of the United States and the orders of the officers appointed over me, according to the regulations and the Uniform Code of Military Justice. So help me God. Now, after the immunity ruling for Trump from the Supreme Court recently, the left is going crazy, of course. Some of them are saying, well, Justice Sotomayor even said in her rebuttal that she thought this gives the president the right to call SEAL Team 6 and have them kill their election opponent. Wow. Chief Justice Roberts said that didn't make sense to him, but some very powerful, very high hourly rate leftist attorneys are suggesting that, well, that maybe that's what Biden should do then. To stop this country from being destroyed by Trump, maybe Biden should make the phone call and send SEAL Team 6 to secure the future of this country. Wow. Here's a quick and easy way to illustrate how stupid that is. So to my existing military and law enforcement folks, I say this: you swore to protect the Constitution. The next clause says, obey the orders of the President of the United States and the orders of the officers appointed over me, with a kicker, according to regulations and the Uniform Code of Military Justice. Now, at one point in my law enforcement career, there was a very contentious situation going on between a deputy sheriff and the sheriff, and I was not the deputy sheriff in this particular case. And the sheriff lost his cool, and by God, I'll charge you, do what I tell you, or I'll charge you with disobeying a direct order. And I put my hand up and I said, excuse me, sir. It's not against the law to disobey a direct order. If you read the law, if you read the Uniform Code of Military Justice, it is against the law to obey a lawful order. Doesn't say direct. If that person, officer appointed above you all the way up to the president, if they give you a lawful order, then you are required to obey it. If they give you an unlawful order, you are required to disobey it. You're wrong if you do what they tell you. Think back to the Nazis at the Nuremberg trials after World War II. They all had the same answer. I was simply following the orders given to me by my officers above me. Sorry, that doesn't cut it. If they sent you to Dachau and said your job today is to kill innocent Jews in a concentration camp, well, that's not a lawful order. Even in the perverted, twisted world of Nazi Germany, that's not a lawful order. You are required to obey a lawful order. And SEAL Team 6 knows very well. If Joe Biden calls them up in the middle of the night and says, hey, tomorrow morning go kill Trump, they're going to know that that's not a lawful order. And they are required to disobey it. Understand your oath of office. Remember it. And if you are ordered by people above you to go outside of that oath and do things that you know to be wrong, have the spine to do the right thing. Have the spine to tell them no. Because if you don't, this country doesn't have a chance. All right, so what I wanted to talk about in this was you. Be ready to protect your home, your family, from various threats that could come to you, including civil disobedience, leading to civil war, maybe all-out war with enemy agents here in our country. That's going to overwhelm the ability of police to deal with. If you're a person of good character, you have skills that they could use, make yourself known to the police. In major cities, you know what, folks? I don't think it's going to work. They got a lot of resources. They think they can handle it. They don't know you. But if you live there for very long, you're putting your family at risk anyway. You're probably going to have to vacate out to smaller communities. In those smaller communities, you can be known to the police, and you could be seen as an asset to help them if necessary. Those of you out there doing the job, wearing the badge, wearing the military uniform, remember your oath. You swore to protect and defend the Constitution, and you have an obligation to disobey unlawful orders. The mere fact that we need to discuss these topics speaks to the horrible, degraded condition of our country today. If you like what I'm saying here, folks, please subscribe, give me a thumbs up, send this out to people you know. Lock and load, folks. We're facing dangerous times. Okay, we got them both here now. You ready? Bud got one. Ginger got one. Oh, she missed it. She usually gets them, doesn't she, bud? Okay, girl, last one. You ready? You ready? Yeah! That's all there is till next time.